But we believe that a principle of transparency to the greatest degree possible or justifiable is going to be really important for this sort of new, B economy of pharmaceuticals.
Bionics is an online, peer-to-peer platform for R&D stage licensing and collaborative partnerships in the biopharmaceutical industry. In other words, Bionics provides a user-friendly infrastructure for biotech and biopharmaceutical companies. This enables development stage biotech companies to display their novel compounds available for licensing on a global scale. On the other hand, the platform offers biopharmaceutical companies direct access to these innovative compounds, which will enable them to fill their R&D pipelines.
Hello everyone, today I'm here with Dr. Barbara Handelin, CEO and co-founder of Audacity Therapeutics PBC. She will bring us today to the story why Audacity came into the beings on their backgrounds. Audacity has a simple mandate: to produce high medical impact, responsibly priced drugs for more disorders that have no treatment or inadequate treatment. So Barbara, welcome to the interview today. Let's start with the first question. Audacity Therapeutics is a PBC, which means a public benefit company. So it's a public benefit pharmaceutical company. What does it mean, public benefit pharmaceutical company? And what is this actually? Is it a B corporation, and why you decided to have such a corporation?
Right. Well, so thanks for that question. So when my co-founders, Michelle Villard, David Hausman, and myself came together with some ideas about what kind of a company we wanted to create and what would be the purpose for this company, we realized that we were really going to need to start with the way in which a pharmaceutical company would be financed. And I'll come back later to why it is that we need a new form of financing, but our general purpose was to have a pharmaceutical company that could balance the valuation on that company, could balance our profit generation with our other very strong held principles for how we wanted to run the company and what its purpose would be in our industry. And that purpose really is to create, design, and execute on a new business model that would enable us to bring far more drugs that can effectively treat all the remaining untreated or undertreated conditions. We wanted to be able to make drugs for those unmet needs and bring them to patients at what we consider to be a sustainable pricing level. And that meant that we would need to maximize our efficiencies, and we would have to be having an agreement with our investors and other shareholders that we have a long view towards generating profits, and that it may be that we will produce good returns, but perhaps not the extraordinary returns that we've seen in our biotechnology and pharmaceutical industry for the last 30 years. And so as we went to look at what kind of corporate form should we take, it made sense to us to incorporate as a B corporation. Mm-hmm. Why? Because the B corporation, which is relatively new, but there's corporate law for the B corporation in every state in the United States now. And the B corporation has in its charter that the responsibility of the board of directors of a B Corp has this balanced responsibility. C corporations require the board of directors to have as its single principal responsibility to maximize shareholder value. And we wanted to say, yeah, let's maximize impact, medical impact, alongside generating good revenues and good returns for our investors. And so we chose the B Corporation because that's exactly what it says in the charter. It requires that the board of directors think about other things like governance, taking good care of employees, being responsible in the environmentally, being responsible ethically in all of our distribution channels around the world and so forth. So it was a perfect alignment for us to incorporate it. It sets out right at the very beginning that maximizing shareholder value is not our sole purpose and responsibility as a corporation.
Yeah, and as I look at this story, and I mean the company, it seems like really has been created to fit the purpose of the pharmaceutical industry, which is treat diseases, which is bring this magic pill to the patients to help them. That's the purpose, right? And that's the purpose of medicine. And seems like Audacity Therapeutics is really following the purpose of the industry and this legacy, which unfortunately seems like a lot of nowadays companies, as you just said, forgot this purpose, this legacy, and they are more on a shareholder maximization, but shareholder value maximization, but it's not for focused patients. And yeah, I mean, you really created the company to create this high medical impact and responsibly priced drugs. And how did you and your co-founders get to this point in your life, in your career? We would be really very curious to learn. I mean, our audience really, it's a very interesting story. Please tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so all three of us and others who have come around us since then, each of us has been involved in the biotechnology industry, and in particular, all of us come out of genetics and molecular genetics, molecular biology. So we've been, sort of, David Hausman, in fact, was the co-founder of one of the original biotechnology companies, Integrated Genetics, back in 1980, maybe even 1979. And so we've been a part of the real revolution of the biotech industry and the application of everything that we've been learning about the human genome and how it operates and how the translation of genes into proteins into physiology and sometimes into pathophysiology. That's been our purview. We've been developers of new technologies, new capabilities, been a part of discoveries of genes. And so always on this, sort of bleeding edge, as I sometimes call it, of innovation, translating science into useful products, both diagnostics and therapeutics, actually. And myself, I've even been on sort of all sides of this. I've helped universities to start new companies or investigators at universities to do that. I've been an entrepreneur myself. And I've also helped investors to make decisions about venture capital, to make decisions about what to invest in. David's been an advisor from his seat at MIT to many companies and has started several other companies since Integrated Genetics. Michelle has been deeply into the drug discovery part of drug development in rare diseases. And so we've each had the opportunity to see a lot of firsts and to have been a part of a lot of firsts and very exciting things. But at the same time, with all this company formation, We've also each had the dismaying experience of watching a lot of potentially extremely valuable and likely highly effective medicines get left aside in a decision-making process that has to prioritize how are we going to make a return on our investment. And so we've watched a lot of science get shelved or never get pursued, or things that seemed kind of, oh, well, you know, been there, done that, you know, that's an old drug, who wants to work on that, even when it actually could be extremely effective for patients. And after 20, 30, 40 years of watching very effective medicines get put aside for financial analytical reasons, we finally said, gee, maybe we don't need so much more scientific innovation for a while. Maybe what we really need to do is to figure out how we can make use of the vast majority of things that don't make that ROI little pinhole, as I call it, that last little pinhole that says, yeah, we can justify making investments in that development. So we came together around wanting to come up with a different business model, and realized that that meant that we needed to start with a different way of financing. And that's, so it's our impatience and our urge to make use of a lot of really effective potential therapies that we were never going to be able to invest in. So we said, well, let's invent a way to be able to do that. And that's what became Audacity.
Yeah. It's very interesting. So you are touching the points like which probably might not be speaking in the industry, because we all know the large pharmaceutical companies is really overall the perception of the industry is towards to them, also from the patient groups, and the companies like Audacity, who has such a audacious mandate, trying to really come up from different perspective, meaning take the shelved science, take the shelved drug candidates that have been developed and invested a lot financial and human capital, and trying to put in another way. This is actually also what we do with Bionics, trying to actively now working with large pharmaceutical companies to invite them to list their shelved compounds that they, because of strategic reasons, they don't want to pursue. And this is where you and me also before discussed, we could work together a lot to really bring value to the patients and not primarily value to the shareholders of the companies. But overall, like we all being people rational, we need to understand how we're going to compete, right, with large pharmaceutical companies. And tell me a little bit more to understand, so to our audience, how Audacity Therapeutics is going to compete, particularly the companies, large ones, that seems like really holding all cards. They are well funded. So it's very interesting to see your point of view about that.
Yeah, it seems perhaps insane to think that you're going to compete in that industry. And that's so the day that we realize that that we in fact don't have to compete, that in fact we can be highly complementary to our existing and legacy industry, was the day that I think we really said, okay, you know, let's stop doubting ourselves and go for it. So here's what I mean by that. So if you look at what goes into the determination of when a company, whether it's a startup biotechnology company or a big behemoth company looking at taking on new drug programs, there are, we have some very standard screens for what we can justify investing in. And those has to have an outstanding patentability. You have to be able to build a very, very strong wall of patents around the product, because we have an industry that is based on a promise that we will have exclusivity in the marketplace. So, it's a very unusual industry. I don't know of very many others that absolutely rely on having market exclusivity for our products. And that's because, it takes a lot of money to develop a new drug and time. And so we're in a contract that says, well, if we're going to spend all that money, then we want to have exclusivity in the marketplace. So patentability is absolutely required, and that means that high novelty is required, because one of the few requirements for issuing a patent is novelty.
Yeah.
And we also have to be convinced, investors or board of directors and management has to be convinced that there is going to be a very high return on investment. And I'll come back to why that is. How did we get to that high return? But those three things: very high return, high patentability, which comes from high novelty. When all those things all three of those have to be very high, you'll see that out of the whole universe of potential new drugs, you've really narrowed it down to a very tiny percentage of all the drugs that you can justify working on. It has to have a very large market, or, as in the case what we're seeing today in the field of rare and orphan diseases, we have to be able to justify extraordinary pricing. And that's because we have married maximizing shareholder value to the making of medicines. So that puts companies in this very small space. And that's why you see extreme competition between all these companies, because they're having to compete over a very small universe of potential products. So we realize that if we can just loosen any or all of those requirements, return on investment, which might mean market size, it means that we could bring prices down. If we loosen the requirement for complete novelty, but still have a good solid product that we can market for a long enough period of time into a cadre of patients who will be helped by it. If we can say, well, gee, maybe we don't always have to be doing something that's completely novel. So how about repurposing? How about revisiting things that have been developed for something else, and reconsider and revisit, and bring things back around? So if we just loosen any or all of those requirements, what you see is that you very rapidly enhance the universe of products that you will be able to invest in and bring to patients. And so that's why we realize we're going to be next door to the range of products that the extant industry will have to continue to be limited to, because they're tied into the economics that they're based on. So we happily can say we're going to work on things that you can't work on by definition, and that's why we're really complementary to them. And being complementary in terms of pricing also is extremely important to us as a basic principle. We believe that all patients should have access to as much medicine as they actually need and at a price that is affordable, we also firmly believe that we have to learn as an industry how to create sustainable pricing, just like farmers have to figure out sustainable farming, and we have to figure out sustainable water supplies and sustainable energy supplies. We have to figure out how to do sustainable medicines development. That's our posture.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So that's absolutely true that competing it doesn't make sense. It should be rather collaborating and being complementary together. And ultimately, I think it's also interesting for large pharmaceutical companies because most of their compounds in their drug development pipeline, when they get shelved, and they are not really bringing any monetary returns anymore to them. And I think Audacity will be the place where they could rely, okay, gee, we can get some, at least a financial return on that, even thinking like purely again from a shareholder value maximization perspective. And I think there is many other things that could be complementary, work together, and ultimately, I mean, we can talk about drug development, market democratization that should become. And I really know that you would be interested to tell us a little bit more about that. We will come back to this point also, but maybe like a little bit you can tell again the such an audacious mandate that Audacity is doing high medical impact, responsibly priced drugs, how it's going to be realized. Is it really the drug development process? Is it the funding, or there's another aspects? And maybe a little bit you explain the business model, so the people they are now interested in Audacity going to run its funding stage, and people they really might be joining Audacity also as investors, so they also want to understand what's the business model would be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right. So, the mandate is to generate as many effective therapies for the long list of diseases for which there is either no treatment or inadequate treatment. And if you stop to think about it, and we're really honest with ourselves, we could probably say that that's most everything, undertreated or untreated, other than bacterial infections. And we don't have very many cures. And really, they're mostly for infectious diseases. Although I did hear this morning that heart disease has dropped as the #1 cause of death in the United States. It's now been rapidly overtaken by cancer. And that's because of some drugs, high blood pressure, statins, and so forth. Also by a lot of interventional cardiology and people not smoking. So we, but we still lack effective therapies for most cancers, most heart disease, most common disease, not to mention rare. So that's kind of a wide open field. There's that doesn't limit us very much. And if we want to do that in a way that allows us to keep costs down, so that we can keep the cost to patients and cost, which is really cost to the healthcare system, we want to keep those costs down, then how do we become efficient, and how do we maximize the sunk costs, as I think you were referencing? Companies and in academic institutions, the NIH, have put a great deal of time and money into compounds that are now waiting and lying fallow. So again, really it's kind of taking from other fields. If you want to be sustainable, then you have to learn to reuse. And so we're going to start, and for the foreseeable future, we're going to be working with on taking advantage of projects where an existing drug, or maybe one that's been approved for some other indication, can be repurposed. So that's reusing, kind of recycling, or a drug that has been taken through advanced, human trials, and then just got left aside, for any of a number of reasons other than that it's not safe. So we know it's safe, and now maybe we could add to the data or take it in a new direction and repurpose it or reposition it in a new indication. So that's sort of compressing or condensing and taking advantage of sunk costs that come before us. So let's do that. Then how do we find those opportunities? Well, it's one of the reasons that I was delighted to become introduced to BioNeex, because we need a marketplace, basically, of where academic investigators or companies or individuals can say, hey, I have this idea, or I have this compound, and I'm going to put it up on a system, so that organizations like ours can come and find those. And we'll also find them through networks and through our own prior experience. Each of us who's involved at Audacity has been in a lot of projects over the years. So there's kind of no shortage of opportunities to say, hey, here's a thing that I know would really work. Let's try advancing it into clinical trials. So, how to access, then how will we do drug development? Audacity will be a virtual drug company like, hundreds of others. We will manage what will be principally mostly clinical development. So we're a clinical development drug company. And we'll manage our clinical trial work and our manufacturing requirements through a series of partnerships and collaborations. And this is where we start to see that we're intending to be, and are finding it kind of naturally happening, that we're discovering sort of a crowd of companies who are like-minded. Maybe it's a CRO, or maybe it's a regulatory affairs specialty consultancy, maybe it's a new kind of manufacturing organization, who also want to be part of this new sustainable pharmaceutical industry, and who want to work at pricing levels that contribute to that. And they want to be very effective and productive and efficient. So we'll be using outside contractors, but we'll be working in a network of collaborative organizations. We also are going to operate with the principle of transparency in our data, because this, again, is a way that we've built in with our tremendous secrecy, because we require exclusivity, which means we require super patentability. Our industry has grown up with NSA levels of secrecy, secret keeping. And while that has supported great financial returns, it has not supported the building of a more robust knowledge base about what actually works and what doesn't, and we don't even have the opportunity to generate more questions. So we believe that maybe with blockchain technology, I don't know yet, but we believe that a principle of transparency to the greatest degree possible or justifiable is going to be really important for this sort of new, B economy of pharmaceuticals. And so there's all the development part. We also have to take advantage of, all the artificial intelligence let's use all of our computational and large data mining and, analysis and relationship creation. Let's use all that to our ability, again, to enhance our efficiency. So let's say we're successful at making drugs. We also work with manufacturers. There are some new kinds of manufacturing, continuous process manufacturing, for example, that is much more efficient, it's much greener for the environment, and can be done on more of a as needed basis. So then we got to get those drugs with approval from FDA. Now we're to the true commercialization end of our business. And again, a number of us who are pursuing this kind of drug development are saying, hey, we don't want to spend 50 or 70 cents of every dollar on sales and marketing. There's got to be a better way, a more efficient, cost-effective way to let physicians know that we have a treatment, it's been approved, it's for these kinds of patients. Maybe there's just some old-fashioned ways of doing that that adhere more to education and working very, very strongly with patient organizations, especially if you're working in a field like multiple sclerosis or a rare condition or various cancer societies, to help to make that education process very efficient. So our business model, we acknowledge, if you're going to produce more drugs in a practical way at a lower cost, you have to address each part of the basic business model of a drug company, all the way to delivery of drugs to market. But we are not alone in doing that. There are lots of bright people out there who are figuring out, gee, we could do this much more smartly and in a patient-friendly and an economically friendly way.
So, Barbara, thank you for giving such an interesting knowledge that we all would be able to really see from different perspective the industry itself, pharmaceutical industry. But overall, like listening to you, as I understand, you are offering to the people, to the patients ultimately, to participate to the drug development process itself and become actually the jury of their journey, to control their journey basically. So they would be able, company like Audacity Therapeutics, from early stage, from early day, be involved in a drug development process to really give a shape, the direction of the industry, and become those they really going end of the day to take this medicine. So I think that's really very audacious goal. It's a really novel goal what Audacity Therapeutics offers. Basically, industry will start to produce and develop medicines that really requires from the patients, and patients will be participated. And I think like also would be very interesting when patient groups would be one of the early stage investors of Audacity Therapeutics, because then they really can tell, right? So there is a old expression that says who pays that gets, right, the music basically. This is when they getting the chance. So we all want to encourage patients group and also physicians, I mean, that having such a impact, key opinion leaders, to get involved with Audacity Therapeutics and to give this knowledge to their patients and be involved which drug should be really ultimately developed. So we have today actually very good discussion, Barbara. I would suggest that we continue our discussion because we still have some points to touch next time. So thank you very much, Barbara, for giving us so many interesting aspects of not only Audacity Therapeutics, but how it's really going to be, what's your vision. So I want to remind you again our audience that today we were having a guest, Dr. Barbara Handelin. She's the CEO and co-founder Audacity Therapeutics. Audacity has a very simple but very strong mandate, which is produce high medical impact and responsibly priced drugs for more disorders that have going to treat more diseases. Thank you very much for listening, and we will meet again soon. Thank you.
All right, my pleasure. Thanks.